Na 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 na. Hey, ubba-bubba, welcome to JuanMD. My name's Juan, I'm an MD. And on JuanMD, I talk all about living life as a doctor and making the most of my Juan life to live. Today, I'm going to be studying again. I'm going to be continuing my reading of the endocrinology chapter. I'm almost done. And I've decided to make this a live stream. Because editing takes a while, and I guess when I live stream, it's more authentic, less editing required, and well, you get to see it right away. Um, Win-win for everyone, right? So what I do in these videos is I just study. I study live and I make it public. I study with you guys, so you guys can watch me while I'm studying, and it can encourage you to study as well. I also open the little chat here on the side, so if you guys have any questions or you're curious about anything that I'm doing, you can also ask me, and I'm gonna be free to answer. Um, so yeah, when I'm studying, I always want to make sure that my environment is conducive for studying. So first and foremost, that means making sure that my table, I have all that I need. I have my post-its, I have my pens, like my pens, my highlighters. Some people ask me, like, I have too many highlighters. Why do I have too many highlighters? But the thing about these highlighters is that there's a system behind these highlighters. So usually, okay, let me explain the logic behind my highlighters. So this yellow one, it means there's a factoid or a tidbit or maybe something important that needs to stand out. So I will highlight it with yellow. Let's look for something yellow that I highlighted. Like most people, what they do when they highlight is they color the entire page. Me, I don't do that. I only highlight important keywords that I think should stand out, are important, because that's the point of highlighting, right? It's so that you can remember stuff easier. So let's see, I have orange, green. Okay. Hemochromatosis is a genetic disorder, and it's associated with a mutation in the C282Y gene. Is that Y or gamma? Y. C282Y gene. So hemochromatosis is essentially when your body absorbs too much iron, can't get... Actually, technically, it's your body can't get rid of too much iron. So you have a buildup of iron in your liver and all your tissues. But, that aside, C282Y is the gene, the mutated gene that you will usually see in hemochromatosis. So, sorry, it's overabsorption, not just release, but overabsorption of iron. Okay. What else? Okay, next we have red. I associate red with anything like pathologic, like a disease, a symptom, physical examination finding. If there's a sign or a symptom that I think needs to stand out in what I'm reading, I'm gonna highlight it with red, or pink. In this case, pink. Yeah, I don't think red would make a great highlighter color because it's too dark. So you wouldn't actually be able to read the text. Maybe it would work in a world where ink was white and paper was black, but we don't live in that world. Well, actually, we have black paper and white ink. It's just generally more expensive. So, for example, hypothyroidism will commonly present in patients who have chronic Hashimoto thyroiditis, and that's what I've highlighted here. So I highlighted burnt out Hashimoto thyroiditis. Okay, what's next? Blue, it's usually to represent anything iatrogenic, any medical procedure, any medication that you will give to a patient, and regardless if this is the cause of a disease or the management of a disease, I will always use blue to highlight such things. And then finally, okay, wait, an example of something blue, metanephrines. So this is a lab test. We measure the number of metanephrines in the urine to manage patients with adrenal problems. Yeah, adrenal lesions found on CT. So you measure the metanephrines first before you do any imaging, because you want to see you don't want any incidentalomas to divert your management of the patient, and so metanephrines will help you determine, like vanillyl mandelic acid. It's usually produced when your body creates stuff like testosterone, or and you will measure that if you want to see if there's anything wrong with the adrenal gland before do any imaging, so you can rule it out first. Okay. Oh yeah, specifically pheochromocytoma. Okay, right. And you want to like rule it out for sure, because the phenoxybenzamine is like dangerous when you give it a patient, and it's something that you really want to manage. And then finally, orange. Orange is my favorite color, actually. If you noticed from my logo, here in the intro. Where's the play? Where is it? There. You see, my logo is orange. Actually, for those of you who don't know, the logo, the circle with the dot in the middle and the two stripes on top, that's a stylized brain. It's the eggshell section of brain CT scan, because those side ones are the temporal and the occipital lobe, and the one in front, that's the frontal lobe, and inside the dark spot is the basal ganglia. Anyway, enough with the nerdy stuff. Sometimes I use green. Green will help me like remember demographic or something special about a population that's more prone maybe to getting a certain disease. But I rarely use the green. I think I only used green once so far in this entire chapter. No green yet. No green. Where's the green? Okay, here we go. Oh! Or sometimes I can use it to highlight something that's unique, that's like eccentric. Although I think, for example, this one, there's no confirmatory test for a patient with low LH and FSH. I highlighted there's no confirmatory test with green. Why I used green for that one and not blue, I'm not sure. Yeah, that's true. Sometimes if you have too many colors, it can get confusing. But the purpose of the colors is for like color coding stuff. But that being said, you don't have to like highlight too much. Like when you highlight too much, you end up having a very pretty looking book, but you never really absorbed anything. At least that's what the studies say, and I trust the studies. Also, my coffee. I have my coffee with me whenever I study, because I love coffee. This is actually, I think, my third coffee for today. I should, put a cap on it after this. Make sure my laptop is plugged in. And I'm no longer gonna ask ALEXA for, I thought I put my phone on silent. Okay. Yeah, phone on silent. Avoid the distractions during study. I don't want to ask ALEXA to do the timer. Instead, what I did is I put a little timer on the screen already, so that I don't have to activate the timer. The thing about putting a timer on the screen is I have to do it in post-production, in editing, and that takes a really long time. It takes, how long does it take? I guess the rendering takes almost 5 or 6 hours just for a 1 hour video, and so it's too much trouble. Plus, I'm working on a MacBook Air. I'm really a Windows person, but it's just that my Windows computer, the one I got, was secondhand, and it was terrible because the specs were terrible. Like the memory was like bad, the motherboard was outdated, so I'm just using this is actually my mom's computer that I'm using right now to study. So much for that. I am going to start the timer. Actually, let's make it 1 hour and 15 minutes. Then when it's done, it's gonna make this sound. Oh, I wonder if you heard that. But anyway, it's gonna make a sound when it's done. I just started the timer for 1 hour and 15 minutes. Okay, where's the timer? It gone. It gone. So yeah, I'm gonna have to crop this. This is so crude. This is so crude. Okay, let's see. This is hard. This is hard. That's bad. That's hard. Okay, I didn't think this through. It was working in... In my demonstration a while ago, it was working, but now it's not working. For some odd reason, it's not working. There we go. You saw it a while ago, right? You saw the text earlier. It was there. I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna start the timer. There we go. Okay, I've started the timer for 1 hour and 15 minutes. And I'm essentially gonna be focus mode from now until then. Wait, let me just freshen up. I felt a bit stressed out by all that manipulation we've done. Wait, I'll get back to you guys. Okay, why did the timer stop though? If you guys know like a widget that I can use so I can put an on-screen timer, that would be so helpful. There we go. Timer is running. That should work. You know what? Just for safe measure, I'm gonna tell ALEXA to start a timer, and then we can have it running in the background. Alexa, start a timer for 75 minutes and 30 seconds.
1 hour, 15 minutes, and 30 seconds, starting now.
Alexa, remove 40 seconds from the timer. Oh, it's going to be hard. I'm going to be catching up with this.
You now have about 1 hour, 14 minutes,
Alexa,
and 46 seconds.
Remove 15 seconds from the timer.
15 seconds removed. You now have about 1 hour, 14 minutes, and 23 seconds left.
Huh. Alexa, remove 23 seconds from the timer.
23 seconds removed. You now have about 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 44 seconds left.
Alexa, remove 6 seconds from the timer.
6 seconds removed. You now have about 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 24 seconds left.
Wait, I should add seconds. Alexa, add 10 seconds to the timer.
10 seconds added. You now have about 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 20 seconds left.
Okay, that's fine. That'll do, donkey. Anyway, I think that's it. I think we're good for this stream. I think we're good. Are we good for the stream? Okay, I think we're good for this stream. So my video is gonna be running. I'm gonna be studying, and if any of you want to study, if any of you wants to join, you can turn this on, put your screen on mute, and then join me to study. Okay, I think we're good. I'll see you guys after an hour and 12 minutes. Oh my gosh. Flies. I hate flies. Alexa,
10
stop.
minutes.
Sorry guys, false alarm.
disconnected from LON. Now connected to WAN.
Alexa, stop. Okay, so I'm done for my review for today. I wonder how you guys did. Were you guys able to study? I hope so. Um, okay. A general gist of what I'm getting here in the endocrinology chapter is that before you do any imaging in endocrinology, you want to investigate first the chemical cause of whatever is causing your endocrinopathy. Because sometimes, a lot of times, you can get an incidentaloma on imaging, and because of the incidentaloma, you're gonna think, oh, okay, this is the cause of it. It's gonna make your mind biased, and you're gonna start resecting something that doesn't need to be resected. So instead, you first look at the chemicals, the hormones that are being circulated in the patient's body, because looking at the hormones is going to give you a clue as per what is the cause of the endocrine dysfunction. Then imaging, you're going to take a look at it, you're going to take a look at the structure of origin, and then you're going to see, oh, okay, the patient has high cortisol, and the ACTH is being suppressed, but he's still producing a lot of cortisol, so it's probably an adrenal problem. You're going to scan the adrenals, and true enough, whoa, the adrenals are huge. But anyway, where can we start? Okay, well, now that I was talking about cortisol, CT of the adrenals, hypoadrenals, cosentropin. Okay, here we go. Let's start with pheochromocytomas. Pheochromocytoma is a problem with the adrenal medulla. The adrenal medulla is in the middle, hence medulla, whereas the adrenal cortex is the outer layer of the adrenal gland. And in the middle of the adrenal gland, you are producing three things mainly. You're producing norepinephrine. No. You're producing catecholamines. Yes, that's right, catecholamines. You're producing catecholamines, so that's like norepinephrine, epinephrine, and then that's essentially the stress. You know, they're what are released and trigger like in a flight or fright response. They help your body to respond to that stimulus, that stressful stimulus. Now, the problem is when there's a pheochromocytoma, the adrenal medulla is producing too much of these, and it's already elevating your BP, and then elevating. Another concept, by the way, in endocrinology is the feedback, particularly the negative feedback. If the downstream stimulus is high, the downstream signal is high enough, it's supposed to tell the upstream signal, hey, we're a bit overloaded down here. You can stop with the messaging until we're good. But the problem is the upstream signal doesn't work. You're producing a lot of cortisol, but the ACTH up there is still being produced. There's no cancellation of the uphill ACTH. Or in this case, the BP is already high, but you're still producing a lot of catecholamines, and that's usually what happens with a pheochromocytoma. Now, well, of course, a pheochromocytoma would produce those flight or fight presentations like headaches, sweating, really increased blood pressure, palpitations, tremors. And so you're going to assess this by measuring metanephrines. You're gonna get a urine sample, and you're gonna measure how much metanephrines are in the urine. And then after that, you're going to tell the patient, okay, for 24 hours, I'm gonna ask you to collect your pee. And then during that 24 hours, you're gonna get all that pee, and then you're gonna measure the metanephrines in the urine for 24 hours. Now, earlier I said that you measure vanilla mandelic acid, but here I learned that metanephrine collection, the overall metanephrine collection, is much more accurate than vanilla mandelic acid. And then, yeah, you can measure the hormones, epinephrine, norepinephrine, And you can also do imaging, but only once you do the chemical measurement. Okay, then when you see the images, you'll be able to determine if the cause is the adrenal gland. But you only do the imaging after the measurement of the urine. And so if the imaging doesn't work, you can also an MIBG scan. The MIBG scan checks if the origin of the metanephrines, the origin of the catecholamines, is outside the adrenal gland, because most of the time it's the adrenal gland that makes the catecholamines. But sometimes there's an ectopic cause, and an MIBG scan will determine where it is coming from. Then you have the pancreas, the pancreatic islet cell tumors. The pancreatic islet cells make three things: insulin, glucagon, and vasoactive intestinal peptide. Now first, there's the insulinoma. This is the more common and the more benign of the three. And usually you're going to... sorry, no cheating. Usually the patient's going to have too much insulin. Now, to measure, what you're going to measure is you're going to check if the patient has a high amount of CRP protein, CRP peptide, because when your body produces insulin, the CRP peptide is cleaved away from the proinsulin, and it's released into the wild, and then you're left with insulin. The CRP, so indirectly it measures, like, as much CRP as you're able to measure, your body is producing that much insulin. So that's the idea. If you're producing a lot of CRP, then probably you are overproducing insulin. Also, there are other causes of high insulin you want to rule out. So say the patient can be abusing exogenous insulin, or maybe something else like sulfonylurea. So you're going to check this patient, and the CRP is... Okay, wait. I am lost there. What is it? CRP. Is it going to be high? Is it going to be low? Give me your thoughts in the comments, and then... Okay, I think I missed that. I think that's for glucagonoma? No. Yes. Well, CRP is gonna be low in insulin abuse. Let me check if that is accurate. Yes. No, I'm sorry. It's not CRP, it's C-peptide. I'm sorry, I'm getting my words all mixed up. But yeah, C-peptide is going to be increased in insulinoma, and it's going to be decreased in insulin abuse. They're pretty similar. Like, they sound kind of the same. CRP and C-peptide. So, But yeah, what else? In an insulinoma, you can also confirm this with 72-hour fasting. And then what's going to happen is the patient's not going to be presenting with any ketosis. Remember, in these patients, insulin is high, and insulin prevents ketosis. Ketosis is when your body thinks that you don't have enough blood sugar floating around. And so what it does is it gets fat and it converts it into ketones, an alternative energy source. Now, when there's so much insulin, your body thinks... Well, first off, your body is not going to have any glucose circulating, because it's all going to be absorbed into the adipose tissue and the peripheral tissues. So you're not going to have any glucose. But your body's also going to be producing a lot of no ketones, because all the glucose is going to be inside the cells, and your cells are going to think, no need to produce ketones. So there's going to be no ketosis after 72 hours. That's hard for patients, because I cannot imagine not eating anything for 72 hours. Then you can also do a CT of the pancreas. Management of insulinomas is excision. Excision, right? Yes. Laparoscopic excision. Next, you have glucagonoma. Most of the time... Now, if insulin tells your body to absorb the sugar into the cells. Glucagonoma is going to tell your body, hey, we're out of glucose, so release some of that, donate it so that the more important parts can have glucose. Contrary to infamous belief, I would not say popular because I don't know how many people believe this. Glucose is actually important for your body. A lot of the parts of your body need glucose. Your brain needs glucose, your muscles need glucose, and without glucose, these are going to have to rely on other energy sources like ketones. Now, when there's glucagonoma, your body is going to be releasing a lot of glucose into the bloodstream, sometimes more than necessary. And so your glucose is going to be high, and sometimes, a lot of times, the glucagonoma is malignant. And so you're going to want to you're going to want to scan the pancreas. Is that right? You're going to want to scan it first. Okay, it doesn't say how you assess it. But you're going to want to give somatostatin analog, like octreotide, and you're going to want to excise the lesion because, it's malignant, and so you want to prevent it from spreading. So that's what you want to do, glucagonoma. There's this phenomenon called necrolytic migratory erythema. It's a characteristic skin lesion associated with glucagonoma. And, if you see this present in a patient, it's like, okay, I don't have a picture that I can use, but imagine you have these black markings on your skin, blackish reddish markings on your skin, and they keep on moving, hence the migratory erythema. If you have that, it's going to hint toward glucagonoma. I wish I had a nice picture I could show you, but I don't, because I don't take pictures of patients. That's like not very good. Then finally, there's the vasoactive intestinal peptide, OMA, or the VIP OMA. VIP, vasoactive, VIP is the one of the hormones that tells your gut to keep moving, keep food moving along the intestines. Hence, vasoactive intestinal peptide. Now, a lot of VIP is going to present with diarrhea, and that's why there's going to be a lot of diarrhea in patients with VIP OMAs, and this is also malignant, often malignant. And because there's a lot of diarrhea, these patients are also going to be hypokalemic because they're not going to be absorbing any potassium, and so hypokalemia. And also these patients are going to be deficient in some vitamins like B12. They're going to be deficient maybe in iron. Is this correct? Yes, iron and B12. So you're going to want to measure VIP, vasoactive intestinal peptide, and you're going to want to do a CT. And you're going to want to excise this. And you're also going to want to give a few other somatostatin analogs to manage this patient. Like, okay, they're not octreotide. I forgot. Lanreotide? Okay, octreotide is still included. Lanreotide is also included. But this is managed with resection because it can be malignant. Okay, I'm sorry, that's wrong. It doesn't say here that it can be malignant. Where did I get that? I'm gonna fix this in editing. I'm sorry, guys. Then, oh goodness, my word. I forgot this table. I tend to skip over the tables, which is, I should pay more attention to the tables. There are multiple endocrine neoplasia syndromes. MEN1, MEN2, and MEN2B. MEN1 is due to a RET mutation, and MEN2A and MEN2B is a MEN mutation. Yes. And these are essentially different organs in your body are going haywire with the endocrine production. MEN1 is, okay, I'm gonna have to read off this because I don't have this memorized well, but I should, and I will. Okay, it's when there's problems with the parathyroid glands, with the pituitary, and with the pancreatic islets. So one thing I'm thinking of is like it's in the midline. So pituitary, parathyroids are like attached to a midline structure, but then again, everything is attached to a midline structure. Um, okay, pituitary, parathyroid, and pancreas. But then there is MEN2A. MEN2A, if I recall correctly, there's also parathyroid here. Yes, there's also medullary thyroid and pancreatic. No, pheochromocytoma. Pheochromocytoma, that's in the adrenals. So we're going a bit more peripheral here. Uh, so thyroid, parathyroid, and adrenals. Pheochromocytoma. And then there is MEN2B. I know this is the one with gastrointestinal endocrine problem. There are also mucosal neuromas, medullary thyroid also, pheochromocytoma still, and marfanoid. Okay, I think later on in the neuro chapter it's gonna elaborate more on this because this deserves more elaboration. Yeah. Pheochromocytoma, MEN2B, marfanoid, uh, medullary thyroid, and there's another M. Mucosal neuroma. Mucosal neuroma. The gastrointestinal tract is like lined with like mucosa, right? So maybe there. Then the big bad diabetes mellitus. There are two kinds of diabetes. There's the insulin deficient and the insulin resistant diabetes. Insulin deficient diabetes would be diabetes type 1. You need to give these patients insulin, usually exogenous insulin, and they're more prone to this thing called diabetic diabetic ketoacidosis. Whereas, although patients with diabetes type 2 can also get diabetic ketoacidosis, it's more common among patients with type 1 diabetes. Diabetes type 2, they're more resistant to the effects of insulin. Now, how do you manage patients with insulin? How do you diagnose patients with insulin? Any one of these three would do. You do one measurement where the fasting blood sugar levels are above 200, or you do two separate measurements where the fasting blood sugar is above 125, or the patient fails the oral glucose tolerance test. That's when you give them a spoonful of sugar, which is terrible, and you measure their glucose within the next 2 hours. And if there's a problem with the glucose measurements within that time frame, then the patient has diabetes. Now, if any of these three are true, you can monitor the patient's HbA1c. HbA1c is essentially when sugar molecules in the blood bind to the hemoglobin in the blood. So that's why you have the HB at the start. And what happens here is that the tendency is the more sugar you have in your bloodstream over a longer period of time, the higher your HbA1c is going to be. And your goal in diabetes management is to reduce HbA1c to less than 7. Normally, HbA1c is less than 6.3, but in this case, these patients already have high blood sugar. You want to keep it low, and keep it low for a long period of time. Now, the very first thing, I have like some notes here that'll give me some keywords that I need to discuss, because it's a lot and it's hard to swallow all of this, pun intended. The very first thing that you need to do with patients with diabetes is lifestyle management. So there's diet, weight loss, exercise. You want to avoid carbohydrates, anything that can make the glucose spike too high, and you want to reduce the number of adipose tissue, because the more adipose tissue you have in your body, the more difficult it will be for you to get rid of glucose, because adipose tissue will be sensitive to insulin, and the more sensitive they are to insulin, the more sugar they're going to absorb, the longer you're going to have sugar in your body. And sugar also, it's not just sugar, it's not just sugar floating around in your system. Your body can also convert sugar to fat. And your worst enemy in fat is LDL floating around in your bloodstream. That's what causes occlusions in your blood vessels. Like, it causes heart attacks, it causes strokes, and that's why you want to avoid building up your LDL. Now, if diet and lifestyle is not enough, you need to give medications. And first and foremost, you want to give metformin. Metformin. Okay, what does metformin do? It's a biguanide. Biguanide. I was just like thinking of that earlier. It doesn't increase insulin sensitivity. That's not what it does. That's the job of sulfonylureas. What it does is it prevents the evolution of glucose into the bloodstream. Is that correct? Yes. It blocks gluconeogenesis. Now, if metformin itself doesn't work, you can give sulfonylureas, although this is like something you don't want to give immediately, because sulfonylureas increase sensitivity to insulin, which means more sugar going into your adipose tissue, and that's not what you want. So first you do your lifestyle, then you do your metformin, and then if that still doesn't work, you do your sulfonylureas. Now, next you have this thing called Cetagliptin. What does Cetagliptin do? Dun, 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 dun. Cetagliptin prevents degradation of your incretins. Yes. Incretins are stuff like GIP, GLP, and what these do is, I know these work in your gut. What these do is these increase motility of your gut, and because of the increased motility, you have less time to absorb sugar. Is that right? Oh. I'm sorry. Incretins don't do that. Incretins increase the release of insulin and block the release of glucagon. So essentially their role is to promote absorption of glucose, and usually your body releases these when you eat something, and the food touches the duodenum and the food is absorbed because you have incretins. I'm gonna have to review this really badly. Next you have Sglt2 blockers. Oh, by the way, there is an oral incretin that they developed. Semaglutide is an oral incretin. That's pretty interesting. Next, there's the Sglt2 inhibitors. What is Sglt2? These are channels in your kidneys that release sodium to absorb glucose back into your bloodstream from your urine. That's why it's S for sodium, G for glucose. So SGLT2 analogs. Now when you SGLT2 inhibitors. When you inhibit SGLT2, this mechanism is blocked. So you have high retention of sodium and high urine glucose. The problem with this is when there's so much glucose in your urine, you're more prone to infections by bacteria, because bacteria also like glucose. They're going to go into your urine, your urinary tract, and they can cause UTI. And which population is especially prone to UTI? women because they have a shorter urinary tract. Next, you have thiazolidinidions. Um, this book did not elaborate so much on thiazolidinidions. I love saying that word, thiazolidinidions. Thiazolidinidions. But anyway, they don't have any superior function to any of the other drugs, but you can give them if you've already done 2 or 3 of the prior drugs and it still doesn't work. You can add thiazolidinidions into your regimen. Oh, and you can't give no, that's SGLT2. Yeah, that's SGLT2. Incretin, you don't give incretin if you have not give Cetagliptins. Sorry, again, let's erase that. You don't give incretin analogs if you have not given Cetagliptin. Yes. Okay, wait, let's start there. You don't give incretin analogs if you have not given Cetagliptin. You don't give Sglt2 blockers unless you've already given 2 or 3 drugs and that doesn't work. Thiazolidinidions, they don't have any superiority compared to other drugs. Let's see. Yes, they have no benefit, no clear benefit. Next, there's the alpha glucosidase inhibitors like acarbose. What that does is it prevents your gut from absorbing sugar, so it goes out your butt. Like you eat it, passes through, goes out your butt. Yeah. Then there's pramlintide. That is an analog of amylin. That prevents gastric emptying, so it slows. That's the one I was thinking about earlier, not incretins, amylin. So pramlintide is an amylin analog. I'm not sure if it's an analog or a mimic, but it slows down gastric emptying, so you absorb less glucose. Glucose takes longer to absorb. And then oh, and it decreases appetite as well. Now, if you've done all of this and it doesn't work, then you can give insulin. Oh, finally, I forgot about repaglinide. If sulfonylureas are not tolerated by the patient, you can give repaglinide because they prevent, they make the patient more sensitive to insulin, but no, they make the patient they make the patient release more insulin, but they don't have sulfa. And sometimes patients can have like sulfa allergies, so they can't take sulfonylureas. Now there's insulin. Basic regimen, insulin glargine. This one has a duration of action of 24 hours, and you typically give this twice a day. It's longer than insulin NPH. Insulin NPH can only work for like 20 hours. This one works for 24 hours, and I think it has a 6 to 8 hour onset of action. Oh no, 1 to 2 hour onset of action. NPH has a peak in 6 to 8 hours, but that's not important because we give glargine or Detmir. But you know, the book says glargine, so I'm gonna stick to glargine. It's a long-acting insulin, I think. Is it long? Yes. And then, in addition to this, you can give short-acting. You should give short-acting insulin thrice a day, typically before meals. So, this one has like a duration of action like 1 to 2 hours. That's like Lispro, Aspart, Glulicine. Cheeky pow. Okay, I got it. No, it's 3 to 4 hours, not 2 to 4. 3 to 4. Okay, I mentioned earlier diabetic ketoacidosis. How does this work? Diabetic ketoacidosis. It can happen to both patients, 1 and 2, diabetes. But what happens is there's low insulin, right? Or the patient isn't producing enough insulin. Your body is going to think that you don't have enough sugar in your bloodstream. So what happens is it gets your fat reserves and it turns this into ketones, and that's released into your bloodstream. However, you already do have a lot of sugar in your bloodstream. So what's happening is there's a lot of sugar, there's a lot of ketones, there's going to be increased acidity in your bloodstream. And so you're going to have these symptoms. You're going to have like hyperventilation. Because what happens when you hyperventilate is you get rid of carbon dioxide, and your body, carbon dioxide is acidic. And your body's going to try to get rid of that to compensate for the increased acidity in your body. There's going to be an increased anion gap, meaning the bicarbonate levels are low. Yeah, so essentially that's diabetic ketoacidosis. When you have diabetic ketoacidosis, you want to manage. You want to make sure that the patient has enough potassium. Is that correct? I'm sorry, where did the potassium come from? That came from nowhere. There's another one called Non-Ketotic Hyperosmolar Syndrome. This was a missed opportunity to call it non-ketotic hyperosmotic syndrome because it rhymes, but it doesn't rhyme, so you know, you're gonna have to deal with that. These patients have a normal anion gap, and these patients have normal anion gap, they have normal amount of bicarbonate. What's the difference? They're more prone to seizures, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, they're more prone to seizures. So, usually when you have a patient with diabetic nephropathy, no, diabetes mellitus, you want to manage the other systems because diabetes can affect other parts of the body. So, for example, diabetic nephropathy, I already mentioned it. You can give these patients ACE inhibitors or aldosterone receptor blockers. Aldosterone receptor blockers. And what this is going to do is it's kidney protective. It protects the kidney. It slows down the progression of diabetic nephropathy. And then there's also the increased blood pressure that can result from that. So these patients are also prone to heart disease. And how do you manage a patient with heart disease? You're going to do EKGs, I'm sorry. Is that all? Is that all? You want to manage the LDLs. If the patient has high LDL, you're also going to give the patient statin drugs. Statins prevent the formation of LDLs from sugars. There's also gastroparesis, diabetic gastroparesis, and you manage this with metoclopramide or erythromycin. Erythromycin is an antibiotic, but it also helps with gastric motility. Oh, there's also this thing called pacemakers. Gastric pacemakers. There's not just pacemakers for the heart, but you can also put a pacemaker on the gut, and it helps your to stimulate the contraction of your gut muscles, which is pretty cool. Then there's also diabetic nephropathy, retinopathy. I'm sorry, when there's like an overgrowth of the blood vessels in your retina because of diabetes, because like the insulin will stimulate vascular growth, vascular endothelial growth, and so one of the things you can give to these patients is VEGF inhibitors. Is that right? Is that right? Oh, it's a leading cause of blindness every year. Like, wow, 2,500 25,000 people can go blind from diabetic retinopathy every year. Wow. Um, Let me say that again. 2,500 people, 25,000 people every year in the United States go blind because of diabetic retinopathy. And then finally, there's diabetic neuropathy, which is when the vasorum, which is like the tiny blood vessels supplying your nerves, because your nerves also need sugar, like I said, they go because of diabetes. They get damaged. Diabetes can cause vascular damage. And because they get damaged, your neurons, your nerves, don't get blood supply. And because they don't get blood supply, well, they're reliant on oxygen, they're reliant on sugar. Sometimes they can use ketones, but if they don't get any of that, they can die. And hence you have diabetic neuropathy. How do you manage that? Oh, right. Oh, that was lame. I mean, I like knew what it was. Gabapentin. It's like an inhibitory drug. It prevents the neuron from firing too much, and they don't tire themselves. You can also give tricyclic antidepressants to these patients, or pregabalin. Here we go. Here's our hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia is the most common cause of admission of diabetic patients. So essentially you just manage this by giving sugar to the patient. Sugar or glucagon, so the patient can evolve sugar into their bloodstream. Now what happens is you're going to have to rule out other causes. So like I mentioned earlier, there's also insulinoma, which prevents with increased C-peptide and increased insulin. Then there's exogenous insulin use, which is going to present with low proinsulin and low C-peptide. What are other causes? Oh, okay. Then there's abuse of sulfonylureas, which presents with high insulin and high C-peptide. Because, like we said earlier, sulfonylureas stimulate insulin, and hence, your fat cells absorb more sugar because there's more insulin to stimulate them. And also autoantibodies against insulin cells. It's counterintuitive, but what happens is when you have autoantibodies targeting your cells, they get damaged, and they release whatever contents are inside. Hence the evolution of high amounts of insulin, and then the patient's going to present with hypoglycemia because all that insulin all at once is going to reduce the sugar in their bloodstream. I want to say exponentially, but I don't really know the math behind this thing, so I'll just leave it at that. But exponentially is a nice word, don't you think? And sad news, I'm out of coffee. It's a sad. It's kind of like it's kind of similar to like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, because like when a patient has antibodies against the thyroid cells, they release a lot of insulin, a lot of thyroid hormone at first, but chronic, it's going to be low because they're out of thyroid hormone. Let's see, is that accurate? I have to correct myself each time. I should correct myself. Yes, thyroperoxidase antibody causes Hashimoto thyroiditis. Alright. Hypoglycemia, hirsutism. Okay, hirsutism is when women demonstrate male pattern hair growth, and usually this is because estrogen is not formed from testosterone. They have too much testosterone, little estrogen, and so they start growing a beard. I used to think that was like really funny until I went to med school and I realized it's like a very serious problem. Because not just because they have a beard, but imagine you're a woman and you have a beard. It's going to affect your self-image, your feelings. Like it's gonna affect your confidence. Like it's gonna be hard for you to go out and see people and that is like a real problem that needs to be, that they need help with. And so if you see women with beards, don't laugh at them. It's not funny. you know they have to deal with it. You could like show support for them, and try to be understanding of what people are going through. I think that applies for like patients in general. You don't know what the person's going through unless you actually talk to them, right? Okay. Oh, then there's also virilization, was like worse than hirsutism. It's like hirsutism plus like deepening of the voice, increased muscles, too many pimples. It's like hirsutism on steroids. Pun not intended. So when you manage patients with virilization and hirsutism, you want to check the chemical cause. So you want to check their DHEA, which is like the precursor to testosterone. You want to check their LH, their LSH. You want to check their 11 hydroxylase, 11 alpha hydroxylase. And what else? Oh, and their prolactin. You can manage hirsutism by giving these patients oral contraceptives and androgen inhibitors such as spironolactone, although I think it's like one of the last resorts, I think. And you can also give metformin, but only to patients with polycystic ovarian syndrome. Polycystic ovarian syndrome, well, as the name implies, is because of ovarian cysts. Ovarian cysts that make a patient more prone to increased levels of testosterone. Is it testosterone? Yes. Because there's a problem with the conversion of testosterone into estrogen. Because these cysts can also manifest as a problem with that. So how do you diagnose a patient with polycystic ovarian syndrome? 1, you can check for their clinical and or laboratory characteristics. So do they have high testosterone, or do they have hirsutism? Do they have increased abdominal girth? Do they have increased pimples? All of these are clinical and lab problems in patients with polycystic ovarian syndrome. Or you can do an ultrasound of their ovaries, and if you see 10 or more cysts, that's another. There's a third one which I am not remembering right now. Irregular menses. Irregular menses. If the patient has any 2 of these, so clinical or laboratory findings consistent with PCOS, irregular menses, or 10 ovarian cysts seen on ultrasound, then the patient has PCOS. So you manage this by giving oral contraceptives. You can give them spironolactone. Although, like I said, spironolactone is last line. And you can also help these patients with lifestyle management, so helping with their diet, managing their weight loss, and hopefully, you'll be able to control it in the long run, But that's it for the endocrinology chapter. Sorry if I got a little tongue-tied somewhere in the middle. I hope you can bear with me. And what do you guys think of this video? If you're on YouTube, if you like this video, please click on the like button and hit subscribe, and click on the bell for future updates. If you are on Twitch and you like this video, please click on subscribe too, so that you can stay subscribed as well. And before we end, I like ending with the word of the day, so let's end with the word of the day. Until next time, guys, this has been Juan. Always remember to live life to the fullest, because you only have one life to live.